This week's guest is Kyle Robidoux. Kyle is an avid skier, runner, local beer enthusiast, and nonprofit manager who has worked tirelessly to ensure that he is not defined by the boundaries that others place on him and his vision. Later this month, Kyle will be the first visually impaired athlete to race the Western States 100-miler, while having a visual field of about 2 to 5% of what a normal eye would see. In this week's podcast, Kyle and I talked about his experience as a visually impaired athlete and what motivates him to explore his limits both on the roads and on trails. We talked about what got him into running and why he continues to do it. Kyle's no excuses approach is pretty awesome, and I'm excited to follow along with his journey from Squaw to Auburn, California in just a few weeks. Enjoy! I am here today with Kyle Robidoux, who is a trail runner, road runner, all the above here in Boston, Massachusetts. Kyle was recently invited to run Western States by Cliff Bar, and he'll be the first visually impaired runner to do so. So today we're going to talk a little bit about what got Kyle into running, what keeps him motivated today, and what he's looking forward to in the future. So thanks for joining me today, Kyle.
Yeah, no problem, man. Thank you so much for having me on.
Of course. So I saw a video that that Runner's World put together a couple weeks ago about you, and it sounds like you got into running not for running's sake, but just to make it easier to play with your daughter, who at the time was 2. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about if that was correct, and what got you out the door the first time.
Definitely. So I grew up being active. I played every sport imaginable and skied and so forth. But as my vision began to decrease in my kind of mid to late 20s, I was less active, and as a result put on a ton of weight, and doctors were pushing for me to start taking cholesterol medicine at a very young age. My father has type 2 diabetes, so I was on the path for type 2 diabetes and was grossly underweight and having a hard time playing with my daughter. So I first started just walking a little bit and was nervous that because of my decreased vision, I couldn't do that. And then I literally started running for a minute, and then 10 minutes and an hour and 2 hours, and kept on going from there.
That's awesome. What did it feel like at first?
The first couple of days were incredibly liberating. I had convinced myself, it was more psychological, I think, that I had convinced myself that I couldn't be active anymore and I couldn't run because of my vision. So it was just really freeing to be able to do that. And then the addiction kicked in, and I started running probably 3 days a week.
Addiction to running? No.
Exactly. Yeah, it's a new thing I heard. So it was literally just 2 to 3 days a week with a Timex watch that I was timing myself. I'd go out and run 20 minutes and then 30 minutes, and then I found myself running for 5 days a week and thought I needed to start doing some research and just, not injuring myself and how often I would run. So it was definitely, the first foray into it was health reasons. And I, did manage probably over an 18 to 24 month period. I lost just about 70 pounds. Wow. And all of my health markers were non-existent afterwards.
That's awesome. And so what year was this?
It was right around 2010.
Cool. So did you ever have goals of running a marathon or a half marathon or anything like that when you started?
Absolutely not. But I was visiting my in-laws one day, I think over the holidays or the summer, and I went out for a run. I was going to run for an hour and 15 minutes, and I kept on running, and I hit a 2-hour mark. I remember just doing repeats on their street for like 4 minutes to get over the 2-hour mark. And I joked to my sister-in-law, who is a very active runner, and said, wow, if I can run 2 hours, I'll never be able to do this again. I should sign up for a race. So I signed up for the Maine half marathon, and that was my first official race with a bib and all that.
Nice. So half marathon was your first race?
Yes.
Same here. It's you don't often hear that. So that's cool. How'd the race go?
The race was great. I remember my goals were just to run through the entire race. And she kind of informally guided me. At that time, I wasn't necessarily running with guides, but we ran together to help with the crowds. And I remember at the 10-mile mark, I was still feeling good. I kind of took off from her. And right when I did that, the terrain got a little tricky. They had you hop over like a median strip. And I remember having to walk that. And then I pushed through and ran hard. I don't know if I had time goals for that half marathon. I remember I had solid time goals for my first full. But I remember it being fun, and the course was gorgeous, and there were huge crowds. So that was a success.
Cool. So for those that might not be familiar, do you want to talk a little bit about like what is it like to run as a visually impaired runner?
So I do have some usable vision. My sight right now is about a 3 to 5% field of vision. So I have very constricted, kind of narrow tunnel vision. However, the vision I have is corrected to about 20/40, 20/60. So I can still read print and street signs. But what I can't see either on training runs or during races are, people around me in order to pass them or get around them. I also can't see any contrast. So things like divots or sidewalks, manhole covers, potholes, I don't see as well. So there are times that I still go out and run on my own, mostly on routes that I've memorized. So those are great for terrain, but not so good if there are people out there that I don't anticipate.
Got it. Was it frustrating at first?
It was frustrating at first and continues to be very frustrating, to be honest with you. Part of what I love about running compared to other sports is that it really just takes a pair of shorts and a pair of sneakers, and you tie them on, you go out the door and you run for as long or as little as you want. And it still is frustrating to me that now, for the most part, majority of my runs are with guides, and I'm very thankful and grateful that I have an incredibly supportive community of guides, but I still have to schedule those, and my guides are always flexible, but they have to be on, start times that work for my guides and work for myself. So that continues to be something that I'm, working through. And I just keep on telling myself that I'm still lucky just to be out there running, whether it's by myself or with a guide.
So you've been working with Team with a Vision, and they're a great training group here in Boston that matches runners that need guides with guides that will run with them. Are they national, or is it a Boston-based group?
So I work for the Massachusetts Association for the Blind and Visually Impaired, and as part of that, I actually help coordinate and direct a one-to-one volunteer program. That part of what we do is we match sighted guides for folks who run, walk, or play golf or go swimming. Team with a Vision is a kind of fundraising arm for the Massachusetts Association for the Blind and Visually Impaired. For years, they were very focused on the Boston Marathon. They turn out about 30 runners every year who are blind and visually impaired, and they do a tremendous job in helping find homestays and organize transportation to and from the airport. And then if folks from out of town or locally are looking for guides, they'll help recruit guides as well. Team of the Vision has started doing a few additional races throughout the year. So Team of the Vision kind of does race-specific guide matching, and then the Mass Association for the Blind and Visually Impaired, our volunteer program, will do matches kind of on a year-round basis. Like I have 5 to 8 guides or volunteers who I run with.
So they're different people. Is it different people in different times of the year, or different people on a weekly basis?
I run with a network of about 5 to 9 guides. And right now I'm at a place where I kind of every 2 weeks, I send them an email, everyone, and saying, hey, here are my priority runs. Is anyone available? Mm-hmm. We tend to tell folks, if you want to run 4 days a week, you should have at least 8 guides. Usually the double the number of guides for the days of the week that you're going to run, just because everyone's not available. There's vacations, people are sick, that sort of stuff.
Got it. And how are these guides being found? How if someone's listening and they're interested in participating, how do they do it? Yeah,
a couple of different ways. One, as part of my work, I also manage a website called United in Stride, and that website is just unitedinstride.com. So that's a platform for all of the U.S. and Canada. I mean, anywhere in the world, really, but it's really kind of U.S. based. So folks can sign up either if they're a runner who wants to guide, or someone who is blind or visually impaired and looking for a guide. So it's really a vehicle to match guides with runners or runners with guides. So you hop on, you create a profile, and you list how frequently you run, what are your paces, where do you live, and then once you create a profile, you can do a search based on your zip code, and it'll pop up, auto-populate anyone within a 5, 10, 20-mile radius of you. And then much like Facebook or Twitter, you can message them directly through the website to see if they are looking for a guide, or if you're a runner who's visually impaired, you can reach out to them and say, hey, I'm looking for guides. Are you interested in doing that? And then locally here in Boston, it could be Team of the Vision, or it could be the Mass Association for the Blind and Visually Impaired as well.
Cool. Let's shift gears to your first Boston. We're sitting here in Boston. Let's talk about Boston. When was the first year that you ran it?
I'm really terrible with dates. I know it was the year after the bombing.
So 2014.
2014 was my first year.
What was that like, doing it the year after the bombing?
It was really, really interesting, because being a Boston resident where I work, just being part of this community, I felt a strong connection to kind of the overall sense and the impact of the day. Although not running it the previous year, or having never run it, I didn't, there was a little bit of distance between like that emotional connection. Mm-hmm. But it was a incredibly powerful day. And also the crowds were huge. They're always big for Boston. And it was really special, particularly for the runners with Team of the Vision, who ran the previous year and either did not have a chance to finish or did finish and felt really strongly about coming back.
Cool. And you've run Boston now. This year will be your 5th or 6th?
This year will be my 6th consecutive year.
And what keeps your training busy outside of training for Boston?
I think variety is really, really important. One of the reasons why I started getting into ultra races and distances greater than marathon training was just because I was really bored with marathon training. Not so much that from a competitive level, but there are just so many 20-mile runs you can go out and do during training. So I really wanted to change it up. And signing up for a 12-hour ultra race really invigorated and excited that training cycle. So every weekend I was out, I started running 2 hours on Saturday and then 3 hours on Sunday, which I'd never done before. Yeah. And then I ran 3 and 3 and 3 and 4. So pretty much every weekend I was achieving a new goal that I'd never met before in terms of distance. Yeah. And that to me was really, really exciting. And it met exactly what I was looking for to kind of reinvigorate my training cycle. And so now I always do try to have, I tend to do mostly trail and ultra races right now, but I still have 1 or 2 road marathons and even some 5Ks and half marathons to, stay on top.
Spice it up.
Yeah, spice it up, stay on top, even though they hurt. I will always say that a 5K hurts way more than a 100-mile race. But it's nice to, try to work on that foot turnover, and it's a different community and different vibe. Yeah.
I was sitting in Squaw Valley ahead of Western States this past year or last year, and I just love asking people, like, what the hell are you doing? You're about to go run 100 miles. You're going to run for almost 2 days, or 2 days or more, or whatever, more than 24 hours. And the response I kept getting was, yeah, but it's just a walk in the park. Like 5Ks hurt. And a few previous guests on the podcast, we've talked at length about 5Ks. So I want to switch gears and talk about, the far end of the spectrum, 100 milers. What's the deal with that?
I don't know. I'm still trying to figure that out myself. Part of it, and a lot of folks talk about the why right now. And the first reason is the community. I do find it's a truly special community, both not only the ultra distance, but just the trail runners in general. I find it's not a better community. It's just different than road running. Yep. And so that's the first piece. And, we have folks like yourself who, when races get canceled, you go out and do fundraisers. And we have elite runners, some of the best runners in the world, the Zach Millers and the Mike Wardians and the Chrissy Mayles, who are out there being sighted guides and volunteering. And you have folks who are finishing in first place, staying at the finish line, shaking hands, or retracing their steps and running in the last quarter mile. And I find that I don't find that anywhere else in the sport, where elite runners are really immersed and truly part of the community.
Yeah, that's what I love most about it myself. Yeah. You have these elite athletes, and it's their job to perform, and it's their job to win races. But at the end of the day, they're doing it because of the love of the community and of being out there and experiencing the whole, range of emotions. And a trend I've seen recently on social media, or not recently, over the last couple of years maybe, is that accessibility and openness and sharing the highs, but more importantly, sharing the lows. And you don't see LeBron posting that, he had a tough training session, but he'll be back at it tomorrow. You see guys like Mike Wardy, and you see, all these athletes that they're open when things are shitty, and they're open when, Hillary Allen talking a lot about her own injury and then another injury. And she had a great post the other day about why she does it, and her why continues when she's not running. And it's not, she's not in love with every stride, but she's in love with the community, and she's in love with, these conversations and that type of thing. And yeah, I totally agree. You can't get that anywhere else. And if you can, let me know.
Yeah, no, exactly. It's an incredibly transparent sport and a participatory one in that everyone supports another. And like you said, I mean, I can't think of, watching Rob Krar's, video about his experiences with mental health and depression and the way in which he uses sport and community to push through that. Like you said, I'd be hard pressed to find any other athlete who would open up that emotionally and that honestly to kind of share that, and also to use it as a learning tool, not only for yourself, but also for others that may be experiencing similar things.
Yeah. So you mentioned Rob Krar. I just got back from his ultra camp, and it was really cool getting to know him as just a rad human.
Yeah.
And just a dude that loves connecting with people one-on-one or in these little small groups. And what he told us was these camps, the camps that he puts on, like, that gets him through the year. And he is so excited for the build-up. He loves the actual camp. And then after the camp, he's still on that high.
Yeah.
And he's been so open with his struggle around depression. And what he shared was that people are messaging him all the time that, like, hey, Rob, appreciate you posting about this. I'm dealing with the same thing. And he finds it super empowering and like his life mission to share this, struggle that is a shared struggle. And I love just seeing the reach go beyond way beyond sport.
Yeah, no, I agree. And it also, as someone who grew up watching sports and professional sports, it's it brings new meaning to the word kind of idol, or someone that you look up to, or even fanboy over, just because they are approachable.
Right.
I've been actually working with Rob a little bit. He's been incredibly generous about trying to work through and make his camp accessible and inclusive for runners who are blind or visually impaired, hoping to get a few runners out there in the next couple of years. But that's so different, right? So you listen to these folks on podcasts, or you see them at races. That's so different than, being a fan of a Major League Baseball player who, you may follow them on social media and you may watch their games, but it's just different when you are actually lining up at the same race or in the same experience as them. And it's a really powerful thing.
Or having taco dinner in their home.
Exactly. Yeah. No, exactly. And speaking of Boston Marathon, I've been listening to a bunch of old podcasts. I didn't know that Rob ran Boston years ago.
Yeah, I think it was
2:25.
Yeah,
in the rain apparently.
Yep.
So,
go figure. It rains at Boston.
Yeah, imagine that.
So speaking of Rob, and speaking of long distance racing, Western States. Let's talk about Western States.
Yeah. What do you want to talk about?
How did that idea come into play? How the process, for those that don't know the process to get into Western States, it's not a race where you just say, oh, hey, I want to run this. It looks cool. I'm going to sign up on Ultra Sign Up. You have to either win a race, get a golden ticket, or compete and finish a qualifying distance race. And they're all 50 milers or above. And a lot of people keep getting these entries and keep putting in for the lottery, and they don't get it. So it's it's similar to Boston, but probably way more difficult to get into than Boston. And so this year you have an invitational bid from Cliff Bar. So what excites you about that race? Let's start there.
Oh, everything excites me about it. The training, again, it's really pushed me in my training every time I'm out for a long run and I want to cut it short a couple miles. I just think back to how will those couple of miles impact me?
Yeah. How am I going to feel in the canyon?
Exactly. So training wise, it's really gotten me to dial in my training. And then just, the history of the race, not only the participants, but the history of the trail. It goes back hundreds and hundreds of years, the Western States Trail, when you talk about miners and migration through this country. And, so it'd be really neat just to kind of have my feet on that trail. And then, just the history and the prestige of the race in and of itself, and also be able to, toe the line and start a race with this truly amazing community, but also incredibly competitive field as well. And, I did enter the lottery for 2017, I was in the lottery. I had a qualifying race for 2018. I was going to enter the lottery. And then I had the idea of reaching out to Cliff and seeing if we could partner and have access to their sponsor bib. Part of my thinking right now is that my vision is, it's a degenerative eye disease. So I'm slowly but surely losing my vision in a sense every day. Strong possibility that I'll lose all of it at some point. So there's a little bit of immediacy around running races such as Western States, or last year I went out and had an opportunity to participate in Trans Rockies. So I'm incredibly grateful for, the opportunity through Cliff, not only for the race bib, but also for the support they're providing me ongoing. This is the first 100 mile or a trail race out of state that I've really wanted to bring my own crew and and by crew, for the most part, I mean my sighted guides, because those are the ones that I trust. And Cliff is being incredibly generous and supportive in that as well.
That's awesome. How many guides will you be running with?
I'll have 5 guide slots, and Amy Rusecki, who is the race director of Vermont 100, incredibly talented,
yes, she's awesome,
an accomplished race runner and race director. She's been guiding me for the past couple of years. She's actually taking 2 slots, so I think she'll run second and then as my guide, and then she'll finish with me as well.
Cool. Have you experienced that? Have you been out and been there for race weekend?
I haven't. No. So there's a little bit of, I would have liked to kind of be a little bit more part of the community when I lined up for it. But this is the opportunity I had. I have been, almost every night I'll watch either a video or read a race report or a documentary about Western States. So that's been really fun, just to, increase my knowledge on the history of it and the participants, but also get as much kind of course terrain intelligence as well.
Cool. Well, if you want to be part of the community around Western States, all you need to know is go to Coffee Bar between the hours of 8 a.m. and 6 p.m. out in Olympic Valley.
Nice.
That's where everybody is.
Oh, very cool.
For a couple of days prior.
Yeah. I am going out to, again, through Cliff's support, I'm heading out to the Western States training camp over Memorial Day weekend. So we'll run 70 miles of the trail. So that's really important to me, because every long distance or every trail race, a lot of it, there's sections where I inevitably have to walk because of the terrain. And then there's sections where everyone hikes, or most folks hike. So I need to know. And then there's trail where if it's runnable, that's kind of where I use it to quote unquote make up time. So this will give me a lot of course intelligence in knowing, if there's a flat section that's runnable for a mile or two, I'll really have to giddy up and get after it to kind of compensate for, slower, more technical sections as well. So
known as a very fast and runnable course compared to Leadville, etc. How do you train for that in the Northeast?
I run a lot of hill repeats on roads here in Boston. I mean, Boston being a flat city, and it's also, it is a challenge for me to get out of town. I don't drive, so even to get to somewhere like the Blue Hills or Wachusett to run the trails, it's challenging for me. So, last Friday I spent 2.5 hours running hill repeats on Mission Hill, which is probably at best a quarter mile of a hill. So I'll run up it, I'll come back down. I did that. And I think I got 1,900 feet of gain on a quarter mile hill.
Wow.
Not exciting, incredibly boring, but it's what I got to do for right now.
Yeah. What tips do you have for people getting into longer distance running?
I think really trust and put a lot of faith in the process. I think people sometimes think, wow, you run 100 miles. It's amazing that you can do that. And I talk to them about the training and the time I put in, both the physical and the mental training. So I think, process is really, really important. And we all love to cross that finish line, get that medal, throw our hands up. And yes, that's the culmination of process or a great event. But the unique piece of it and what we really should be celebrating is the 3 or 6 or 12 months of training that went into that. So I think 1 is really dedicate to training. 2 is find a race that fits your style. I think sometimes folks, within the ultra and trail running community, they're great mountain runners, they're great downhillers, and they're great climbers. And I think part of it is finding a style that fits you. And I also think start small. I think, if you're established or a veteran marathoner, look at either a 50K or maybe take a crack at a 50 miler, but go slow. And it should be, a 2 to 3 year progression almost by distance.
The phrase that keeps coming up over and over again, I've done now half dozen to dozen of these interviews. Everyone has mentioned the process, and Ben Rosario was very keen on highlighting that they at Hoka Northern Arizona Elite, they don't talk about race results, and they don't talk about, or in terms of like, we're going to run and finish second, or we're going to run and finish on the podium, things like that. And it's really interesting at the elite level, but even more so at the level that we're at, where it's not our job. And if we're not loving it, who cares? Like, what's the point?
Yeah.
And so I just find it fascinating that like there's this consistent trend around people who are successful or people who are super dedicated and motivated, that they're not shooting for sub 24 hours. They're not shooting for, a sub 3 marathon. They're not, I want to experience it. I want to love the training. I want to get the best out of myself. And it's just super cool to see.
For sure. And I think for me, a big piece of it is, that's life right there, right? It's whether you are trying to ace, a test you're in high school or college, or you're trying to get a promotion at your job, or you're trying to ski and you want to get on a blue trail or ride the chairlift for the first time, getting an A on a test or getting a job promotion, that's after the fact, right? It's the work that you put in to get there that you should be celebrating, while also recognizing, much like ultra races, whether it's a 50 miler or 100 miler, there's going to be a tremendous amount of up and downs. And I think part of life is figuring out how to manage those highs, but also more importantly, those lows, and knowing that at some point, if you're at mile 40 and all you want to do is puke and sit down in a chair, knowing that for the most part, it's going to get better at some point. And I think that's the same with our jobs or relationships and families and social networks as well.
Exactly. I love it. How do you use social media as part of what you do?
I have a love-hate relationship with social media, although I'm on it all the time.
Yeah.
I feel like it's interesting that I wonder if people will still run, if they would still run if there wasn't social media and if you didn't have the opportunity to post your run every day. So I try not to do that as much. But I also know, I'm very lucky to, I'm an ambassador with Topo Athletic. I've run with Nathan Sports over the past couple of years and now working with Cliff. So, there's some expectation of being active on social engagement. I dare to use the word influencer, but letting folks know what you're doing and what products and gear you're using. But I also think the biggest piece, and when I get frustrated, I think back to the community, and I think back to this guy. So about 2 years ago, I became aware of this guy. Lives out in San Francisco, 81 years of age now, but he has been running trails, 152 marathons, 100 milers. There's this video on YouTube from 1979. He was absolutely destroying the quad dipsy, totally blind. And I was lucky enough to connect with him. We shared a couple phone conversations and emails. And when I mentioned to him that I ran the Vermont 100, he said to me, wow, I always wanted to do Vermont 100. And he rattled off these other races outside of the California area. And he's like, but I didn't know any guides. There's no way to recruit guides. There's no network like there is now of social media. And that really struck me, so whether it's United in Stride and that network or just social media in general, I feel like or at least I need to focus on kind of the positive outcomes of social media. And, it's opportunities getting to know you. And, the running community is incredibly generous and approachable. So it's really fun being at a race and someone says, hey, I'm Joe. And I'm like, oh, Joe, I don't really know you. And they're like, well, we're Facebook friends. Like,
we
oh,
talk
awesome.
every day.
We talk every day. I'm like, oh, okay, it's you. And they're like, oh,
what's your handle?
Yeah, exactly. And like, oh, okay, now I know you. So, that's I think the really positive impacts and the measurable outcomes of social media.
Definitely. What would you tell the 2010 version of Kyle in terms of, knowing what you know now about the training and racing and all the adventures ahead?
My ankles and knees would probably say, don't do it. But my heart and my soul would say, just keep getting after it and keep being active, keep building that community. And most importantly, have fun. I certainly set goals for races, or most races. I have time goals, or I want to run the whole thing or run every hill or whatever it may be. But at the end of the day, it's just important to, smile, throw high fives to all the amazing race volunteers, and just enjoy being outside and your fellow runners and racers and crews. It's, it's a fun sport. And at the end of the day, that's what it should be.
Definitely. What are some of the bucket list races you've got?
Man, I don't know. I ticked off Trans Rockies last summer and Western States this year. I really wanted to run Leadville until I learned, partly by running Trans Rockies, that it's incredibly more technical than I thought. I really want to get out and run speaking of you and races, run the North Face race in California.
Yeah.
I've never run the Headlands. And partly because I do have some usable vision right now, and I still can see landscapes. Mm-hmm. So I want to try to get out to as many big mountain races as possible. And then my background is more in skiing than running. So I also want to try to I've never done backcountry and big mountain skiing, although I've been skiing my entire life. So winter of 2020, I really want to try to get above tree line, maybe do some heli skiing or figure out a way to hike up and ski down some big mountains.
That's really cool. Who are some of your role models in the sport?
From a personality and competitiveness, I think Zach Miller, it's hard not to run with his heart and the passion. And although we don't share the same foot speed, and he makes a lot more noises and grunts when he runs than I do.
That can be practiced.
That can be practiced, but the dude just puts it all out there, and it's hard not to just admire that. And I've also come to know him a little bit, and he's just a great person. He's a fellow Beast Coaster, living in Colorado. So I think that's great. I've just over the past 6 months, I've got to know Chrissy Mail a lot more. She guided me at the California International Marathon. And, just a great person, a great human with a really, wonderful spirit. Maggie Gooderell has been incredibly supportive of, me personally, but also guiding. She's run with Achilles Philly for a number of years and has guided runners. So those are some of the folks. And then, not a role model, but, one of my big drives is, I have an 11-year-old daughter who I just want her to see that, and others to see that, getting outside and there's the boundaries are really just what we or others create for us, and trying to push and break through those boundaries. And again, the process, I want her to see that I have to leave, every morning at 6 a.m. on Saturday and Sunday, and, to get out there and run in order to be able to do the races that I want to do. And, I hope that instills a sense of responsibility and drive in her, regardless of what she chooses to do.
Does she run?
She would not qualify herself as a runner. She's super active in, club soccer and gymnastics. She's good for probably 2 to 3 5Ks a year. And this past Memorial Day weekend, she actually ran her first 5K trail race up at Pineland Farms.
Oh, cool.
She initially wanted to do the kids 1K, and I talked her and I bribed her essentially to do the 5K. And just to see her out on the trails finishing with a huge smile at the finish line. And the first thing she said to me, she's like, Daddy, she's like, I passed so many people. I counted how many people I passed on the downhills. I just remember you saying, hammer the downhills. And she said, I did that.
That's so awesome.
That was awesome, you know? So those are the memories that we really, really cool.
That's awesome. Yeah, you mentioned some really cool athletes there. Maggie, she just knows everyone, and she's always doing awesome things. Zach Miller is really like, so I saw him running North Face. I think it was 2016, must have been 2016 when the relay was still in the headlands as well. And I remember I was finishing my 10K loop as he was finishing the 50 miler. And I had, I don't know, a mile to go. So I was at mile 5 and he was at mile 49 and he comes charging up behind me with this noise that I'll just remember forever. Yeah. And then you could hear the noise on the video that they put together, chasing down, I think it was Hayden.
Yeah.
And I remember him passing me and I was like, holy shit, that's mile 50 of his race. And I can't put out that kind of effort in a single mile.
Yeah.
But a chat I had with him was really what got me thinking about I should do a podcast.
Yeah.
So I'll forever be thankful of him kicking my ass on the Manitou incline.
Yeah.
And then the Mexican dinner we had afterwards, where I basically asked him one of these questions like, why do you do it?
Yeah.
And then I just shut up and he talked for like 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And it was just like, I wish I could just like replicate or share the answer that he had, but it was like, it was so simple. Like, I want to know what I can get out of my body while I have it.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think, one of the beautiful things about the Miller Hawks video from that, North Face race, which I've actually watched probably 4 or 5 times with my daughter, who first commented on the noises. She's like, is he all right? I'm like, he is just
no.
No,
he's good.
He's good, but he was working hard. But, the most beautiful thing is the finish, right? So it's not only the adrenaline and the excitement that he has for his own finish, but then standing there at the finish line and seeing him, not only cheer, but then essentially tackle Hayden and give him huge congratulations and tell him, you are the man and you've arrived. Like, again, you don't get that in sport, right? You don't get that at the World Series where, you shake hands and you move on. But so the camaraderie in this sport, even though it is competitive, is outstanding. And I think that's why I want to get more and more people to kind of, not make the permanent transition from roads to trails, but, get outside and enjoy that a little bit more. And while knowing that you can still be competitive, you can still run fast times, but it's the community, and it's also the ability to run 5 miles, eat a bunch of food, and then run another 5 miles. You don't get that in a marathon.
Yeah. What I remember, or how I was describing the 50K that I did in the fall, was basically I would run 5 miles. Devin Yanko would give me snacks, tell me to scram, and then I would run another 5 miles. And then Devin would give me snacks, tell me to get out of here. And then it's just like on repeat. I saw her 6 times, 5 times. And it's just like, just running from buffet table to buffet table.
Exactly. Yeah. And and people wonder why we do it.
Yeah. I mean, it's an experience that you just have to have. And the like you said, the community is what drives it. And, to see the support around athletes of any level that pros have, and the pros loving the engagement, and it goes both ways.
Yeah, and even everyday runners, and also folks who have never tried a trail race, and even if it's a 5K trail race, that's huge. And I had the opportunity last summer to go and present at the U.S. Trail Running Conference about building inclusive races and athletes with disabilities divisions, and kind of building on the Vermont 100 had the first ever athlete with disability division for ultra race or trail race. And one of the race directors went back to his hometown in California. I think he runs Pacific Coast Trails, and they host like 20 or 30 trails. And he decided at one of his, I think it was a 10K, 5K, 10K, multiple distances, was really close to the California School for the Blind. So he created a visually impaired division, reached out to the school, and this past fall, they had 6 or 7 runners who are blind and visually impaired, all young people, who went out there and ran for the first time ever on not only on a trail, and it was gravel road, but it's not road, But then also the feedback that I received from a few parents who said it was so amazing to see my kid participate in a race or an activity where everyone else was doing, right? So you go to these events where it's an adaptive sport and it's just all people with different abilities, but to see them actually participating in a race with
Same arena
with everyone else was incredibly powerful to see. And now some of these young people are literally doing like almost all of the Pacific Coast Trail races, and they're out there, pictures on top of mountains with the biggest smile on their face. And I think that's obviously important overall, but it also speaks to the inclusiveness of the trail running community to kind of build out and create opportunities for that. And there's certainly a ton of road races, including the Boston Marathon, that have, athletes with disabilities divisions, but, to be able to create that and move that into the space of trail running is really exciting as well.
Cool. So what can other runners do to be more inclusive, be more welcoming, or what would make it easier for more runners to do it?
I think if folks are active with a running club, whether that's a standalone community-based running club or something affiliated with a running store like the Heartbreakers, is create some opportunities for organizations or athletes with different abilities to come in and, present to them about guiding opportunities. Also reach out to runners in their community and invite them to participate in the regular weekly runs that groups do. Also being available to be a sighted guide and sign up for United in Stride is really important. The great thing about being a guide is, if you're already out running 5 days a week, you're essentially volunteering on one of those runs, and it could be your recovery day run. Mm-hmm. I have 4 guides right now. All my guides are amazing, but I have 4 guides right now who all happen to be med school students. So they're like A personality overachievers. They hammer, one of my new guides is a 4:51 mile PR, which is hard for me to wrap my head around. So I run with her on like her recovery days. Yeah. So I think it's really easy it's a great opportunity for guides to runners to be able to wrap their love of running into volunteerism. And then for folks who are either connected to race directors or their local races, have a conversation with them about creating either a visually impaired division or an athletes with disability division. And it's not always, if you build it, they'll definitely come. But just knowing that a race has a visually impaired division, even if you're looking at their website and you want to sign up, it's really great knowing that, because then the conversation is much easier. Like I have to reach out to every race director and say, hey, I really want to sign up for your race. Are you cool with me having guides? 99 out of 100 races say yes. What can we do to be supportive? But seeing language about an inclusive race or an athletes with disability division makes that ask a lot easier, because I know that that person has already thought through some ways to be inclusive.
Very cool. Kyle, where can people find you on social media?
Great question. So on Instagram, I am Blind Beer Runner. I'm a big fan of local beer. And Twitter, I'm just Kyle R. Robidoux. And Facebook as well. Cool.
Well, I gotta ask about the beer. What are some of your favorites in the Boston area?
Oh, there's so many. I think styles are. I actually like all beers except for IPAs. So I'm a big fan of Notch Brewing in Salem. They do some wonderful ales and lagers. Mystic Brewing in Chelsea. I'm a big fan of saisons and farmhouse ales, and they can't miss when it comes to that.
Very cool. Well, thanks so much for joining us today, and good luck at Western States and beyond.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having me on and doing all that you're doing in the running community as well.
Of course. Thank you. That's it for today's episode. Like many long runs, it's sad when it has to end. I hope you join in next week on For the Long Run. And in the meantime, happy trails. If you've enjoyed this episode, it would mean a lot to me if you shared it so that others can find it and enjoy it too.